Welcome to the Let Me Be Free podcast. My name is Jackie.
And my name is Alwyn.
We're two sisters from Ireland living in Australia, navigating our healing journeys together, and this is our podcast, Let Me Be Free. We'll be interviewing everyone who's helped us to get us where we are today, whether that's therapists, loved ones, people from our Facebook group, Let Me Be Free the Wounded Inner Child, or people who we've never met but have had huge impacts on our lives. Follow along with us on this journey as we try to dissect what has really worked for us in the hopes that you too might be freed. Welcome back to the Let Me Be Free podcast. Today's episode is going to be an interview with Mary Knight. Now, if you want to know more about Mary Knight and why Alwyn and I decided to interview her, go back to episode 13, the last episode, where we talk about why we wanted to interview Mary and also give a little bit more information about our own story about how our suppressed memories resurfaced. That episode and this episode has a pretty high trigger warning. As always, I have timestamped the episode, this one and last one, so you can go in there and look and see what works for you and what doesn't in terms of what you can listen to and what you can't. So Mary Knight was 37 when memories resurfaced for her of sexual, physical and emotional abuse from her childhood, from her parents, her father, mother and other family members. She experienced familial sex trafficking, which basically is when family members, in her case her parents, rent her out for sexual exploitation, which included posing for photography and child pornography. And when her memories came back, she wasn't sure if she could believe those memories. So she decided to speak to a group of people from the False Memory Syndrome Association, because she just felt like they were the subject matters experts on false memory at the time. And she took the opportunity to essentially try have them convince her that her memories were false. She filmed those interactions and turned it into a documentary called Am I Crazy? My Journey to Determine If My Memories Are True, which I have linked in the show notes. And today, thankfully, she has given us an opportunity to ask her some questions and find out a little bit more about her experience and ask some questions from our experience of a similar childhood.
Hi, Mary. Welcome to the podcast, Let Me Be Free. So we'll get straight into it. I just wanted to get a little bit about your life now and what's going on for you now and how your life is.
I have a better life than I thought I would ever have. And I just have so much happiness in my life. I'm creative. I've done films. I've done multiple films, and I just finished my memoir, which is a collection of essays. So I've gotten to accomplish some things I've wanted to do. I really like that I get to help other people. And I used to have severe pain, and now I'm almost completely pain-free. And that's so nice. I do lots of yoga. I hike. I am happily married, and I just really have and children are a part of my life, and I really like that. I do my grandchildren. I do volunteer work at my grandson's school once a week. Fridays are my Grandma Mary Day, and then I also I babysat a little girl today, and I just really enjoy her. I'm kind of like a grandma to her, so we've had foster children. Children are a big part of my life, and I'm just getting ready to go back to social work and do clinical practice. I do play therapy. I do child directed play. It's non-directive play therapy. So the child chooses what to do, and the idea is that you listen to a child through a child's play. A child speaks to you through their play. So yeah, I like my life.
Amazing. Yeah, in your memoir, when I read the essay on Are My Repressed Memories True, I love that one of the things you put in there is that now you have such a happy and more healed life. And I think that for me too, one of the things that always assures me that my memories are true is that my life works better now.
Yes.
And I don't know that there's anything more validating than that, because prior to my repressed memories coming up, I had spent about 8 years continuously seeing therapists, going to doctors, going to alternative therapists, doing silent meditation retreats, doing, all these different things, seeing naturopaths. And the reality is that my symptoms that I had didn't get better. And if they did, it was a very small fluctuation. And then my memories came back and it was like, okay, now I know what it is I need to work with. It's like, now I can see what it is I need to heal. And as a result, the reduction in my symptoms and the fact that I can live a better life and happier life, that is the biggest validation for me in my life. And at the end of the day, that's what I need. I need myself to believe. That's it. So I love that you included that in that essay in your memoir. By the way, I read that in 2 days. I could not put
Wow.
it down. Yeah, and I'm not a
Oh,
reader. I devour audiobooks. But your memoir, it is interesting. It's such a strong and sometimes triggering topic. But I found that in your documentary, just like in your memoir, you seem to put it across in a very light energy way. Was that a conscious decision on your part?
yes, yes.
Okay.
I in my films, I only will tell about one childhood atrocity. In my memoir, I did trigger warnings so that you would know when it was going to be a difficult to read essay. But then I found that I have 3 essays in my memoir that are as triggering as they can be. I mean,
Yeah.
very brutal. But most of them I have low or medium trigger warnings
Yes.
on, with those 3 exceptions, which are extremely high trigger warning. But the others are low or maybe medium because I just tell about one thing that happened, and or yeah, even mine on familial sex trafficking and ritualistic abuse. It has a medium trigger warning because I didn't put details in, and then
Yes.
I put details in the examples of ritualistic abuse, examples of familial sex trafficking.
Yeah, I found that really helpful because, you know, sometimes in my day, I can handle the high, what did you call it? The high,
Trigger warning, the extremely
yes.
high.
Yeah, high trigger warning. And then sometimes I just can't. And it can change from 9 a.m. in the morning till 2 p.m. in the day as to what I feel like I can handle. And so it was great because I read the whole book in 2 days because there was moments where I was like, oh, I really want to read the essays now that have the high trigger warning. And I found them so valuable, but I found them valuable because in that moment I could receive that information. And I
Yes.
feel like one of the things that I've learned through this whole process is in my experience of trauma, I did not have control, and so in my world, anytime someone takes that control out of my hands, it triggers me. And so I feel like by giving the trigger warnings, it was like your way of going, okay, I have this information to share, but I want you to be in control of how and when you receive it. So I found that an excellent way to lay out your book. And I haven't seen it done in any other book or memoir that I've read. So I applaud you on that. I have so many questions about your book, but I do have other questions to ask as well. So I wanted to ask you, at the start of each podcast, we actually ask everyone for their 3 fears and 1 happy memory.
Yes. So I thought about that a lot, and I had a really deep massage yesterday. And I mean, I just let go of so much fear. I just felt so safe in the moment. And I'd already heard that question. And I'm like, what would I answer? Because I feel so safe now. So my fear that I can think of, because I just was doing that paperwork that's really driving me nuts. So it's that I won't be able to do that. I mean, it's a momentary fear. I'm just saying sometimes I'll have this momentary fear, whereas I know really I'm going to be able to complete the forms and everything, but it's just a headache to do. And then the other one is I rent out, I used to live in a condo before I got married, and I rent the condo out, and my renter has not only not paying rent, she hasn't been returning my calls. So I need to take a trip down there and see her. And my fear is that I will, well, that she'll keep eluding me, but also that I want to handle this in a way that's businesslike, but also in a way that's not hurtful to her. So so I have fears about that, but I have so few fears. That's it with fears. And
I
then
do have a question for your fears, because I read in your book that one of the symptoms you still have is nightmares. And for me as well, the nightmares, night terrors, a lot of what happens for me is at nighttime. And a big fear of mine is always what will trigger them to become more intense, because the more intense my nights get, the harder my life is to function normally. Is that a fear you have at all?
Not as much now, because
Mm,
even since I've written it, the night terrors have been less.
mm,
So I I mean, I don't know any way to completely no longer have nightmares,
mhm,
but and I try to live my life in a way that I could rest the next day if I need to. I mean, I do. I have a easier schedule than I have had in other times in my life,
mhm,
but I'm getting less afraid. There are times I'll be afraid to go to sleep and I realize that I'm afraid of the nightmares.
mhm.
But yeah, there are times that I'm afraid related to that, or afraid of what will come up in my sleep. I didn't think about that because it hasn't been just recent that I've had them.
That's great. I love to hear that.
Oh
I
yeah,
love to
I've
hear that.
gotten to think so much better than it used to be. Even, as I sometimes when I wrote parts of my memoir, things have healed some even since I wrote it. But
Wow.
I do still have nightmares at times. And one way I handle it is I give myself 9 hours to sleep. So
Mhm.
the fact that I don't try to get by with minimal sleep, I know I can't do that.
Yes.
So I just like you would do with a little child, you give them a little
Mhm.
extra time. That's what I do.
Well, I just love to hear that because, you know, when I've had nightmares my whole life, I've had night terrors, I've had the whole shebang. And even though there are so many other symptoms that I have significantly reduced and the intensity of the nightmares have reduced, a lot of things have reduced. But I love to hear that with everything that you experienced in your childhood, that you have not now got to this point in your life where you can say what you just said. Like that is just to me so uplifting and gives me so much hope for the future.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad because I really want to give people hope, because my life is better than I ever thought. If I'd been
Mm,
thinking of what life I would have sometime, my life is better than that. So
mhm.
yeah, I really believe recovery is possible.
Amazing. And so your happy memory, or was
Well,
your massage your
this
happy memory?
weekend I got to see all my grandchildren together, and that's
Oh,
so wonderful. And we made little Christmas tree cakes, which are just like a triangle of cake with I go ahead and frost it. Just like a yellow cake with buttercream frosting that's green, um, and has green food coloring in it. And then they decorate it with like a miniature chocolate for the trunk, and then they put M&Ms or whatever for the
wow.
ornaments. And that just was so fun, having all 6 grandchildren um, doing the Christmas tree cakes.
That's a lovely memory. Okay, so in the documentary Am I Crazy? My journey to discover if my memories are true. I understand that the goal of that documentary when you made it was to interview people who are false memory advocates to determine if your memories are true. But what I actually found you ended up with, in my opinion, is access to a group of people who either doubt or don't believe that sexual abuse, a relationship between an adult and a child, is detrimental to that child.
Yes.
Could you talk to that? I
Yeah,
have some examples actually that I was just
oh
going to
yeah.
read out to prompt your memory. So, Eleanor Goldstein, author of a number of books on false memories, she said, I don't think sexual touch is the horror of all horrors. Dr. Pankratz, I hope I'm saying these names right,
Yes.
he's a board member of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, said stroking the vagina of a 2-year-old child by a man is done out of curiosity.
Well,
Um,
yeah. And when he said that, I was just dumbfounded when he said, I
mhm,
said, you think an adult would touch a child out of curiosity? I mean, what would an adult be curious about? But he also said very clearly that a child under the age of 3 would not be affected no matter what happened to them. And the example he gave was if a child under 3 witnessed the murder of his parents, it wouldn't affect the child, which was
yes,
his example of something so extreme, which obviously the child would need to be raised by someone else. I mean, obviously that would affect the child. So
yes.
yeah,
Dr. Wakefield, again, a board member of False Memory Syndrome Association, they said they want research done on how long-term loving relationship between a child and an adult affects them. And
yes,
Dr. Loftus, who's the psychologist who has testified in court on behalf of, I think it was Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Ted Bundy. She couldn't identify any ways in which her experience of molestation at 6 years old negatively affected her life.
Right.
And yeah, like it just seemed like you were there for one purpose, but what ended up happening was you got access to the opinions of a number of people who just don't seem to believe
Yeah.
in the effect that a man or an adult woman having a sexual relationship with a child negatively affects them.
Right. Right. Yeah. And Dr. Loftus, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, she testified in Harvey Weinstein trial, and she was I think she testified in Ghislaine Maxwell too, and she didn't testify in Bill Cosby, but the defense team consulted with her. But I mean, basically, she testified that, I mean, Bill Cosby, he shouldn't be held accountable because their memories aren't clear enough or something. I mean, you know whether or not you've been raped. It was just, yeah, it was so extreme. And Dr. Underwager was the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. When it was started, they got a mailing list from Dr. Underwager, and he's the one who said that all forms of sexuality should be acceptable, including pedophilia, that he would say it was blessed by God. And they did kick him off the board, but his wife is Holiday is Wakefield is his wife, and she continued to be on the board, which what she said was that they should do research on loving relationship between an adult and a child, loving sexual relationship. So when I really did make an honest attempt to think through my memories to see if they were true. And what I thought I would do is talk to people who were a lot like my parents. My parents were deceased, so I couldn't talk to them. And so False Memory Syndrome Foundation founder, that was just, I was amazed she was willing to talk to me, but she was. But they also say that you have these memories because you read this book, or you have these memories because you went to a counselor, and the counselor somehow has that much power over you that years and years later you would still believe this, something that's false. And so I decided I would not go to any psychotherapy. I would not go to counselors at all while I was making the film. And I decided that I would read everything. I would spend 2 months reading nothing but their literature. So I did. And I was just appalled by some of their literature saying that child sexual abuse is no big deal.
And it just makes me wonder, if I'm always thinking, how do we stop this from happening to another child? And if what's underlying a lot of the sexual abuse that happens is that there is a population of people out there who do not believe in the damage that is done to a child, how do we change that? How do we inform people that sexual abuse of a child is damaging? Is that something that...
I don't think they believe it though. See, I don't know that the people who say it believe it. They may be lying. Like, for instance, I'll talk about Marilyn Vanderbeer, former Miss America. She was Miss America in, it was 1958. Anyway, former Miss America, Marilyn Vanderbeer. She was incested by her father, who was very wealthy. And her sister, Marilyn had recovered memories, but she has a sister with continuous memory of abuse. So her father told her that I never would have done that if I'd known how much it would hurt you. And she held on to believing that her father really didn't know how much it would hurt her, and that he never would have done it. Until after she died, she was contacted by another one of his victims and found out that he was still victimizing people basically until he died.
Yes.
He told her, I never would have done that if I'd known how much it would hurt you. And so now he knows, you would presume he would never do that again, right?
Yeah.
But no, he kept doing it until he couldn't do it anymore because he was dead. And she talks about how much that hurt because she had believed it. But no, it's not true. When he knew how much he hurt her, he still kept doing it to other women and other children. And so I think, I think some people do that to get away with things.
And it's interesting, you also mentioned in your book about a situation with a friend of yours whose sister came out with memories of abuse, and the brother went to the authorities, and the father ended up...
You're talking about Jimmy Hinton. Yes. And but yes, She recovered memories. Alex is her name. She recovered memories at age 19. She was not willing to be interviewed, but she was totally in favor of her brother being interviewed. So, and her mother also was interviewed. So she remembered this, and she knew her father was babysitting with young children. And she told her mother, and her mother believed her immediately. And the next day, she told her mother late at night. And the next day, they went and talked to her brother, who's a minister. So the father, who was the abuser, is a retired minister, and then her brother, so his son, is a minister currently. So she went to the church office and talked to her brother. He believed her right away, and he and his mother went together to the police. So this young woman's mother and brother went to the police, and the father didn't know how much the investigator knew, but the brother and mother were sitting there as he was let in for questioning. So they knew something. He confessed to 23 victims. They know it was more victims than that, but he confessed to 23 victims. He's in prison for the rest of his life. He was tried. He was arrested for the abuse of the young girls who were still minors. Yeah, so that family did things right after they knew.
And I think what really stood out for me in that story was how the father then said to the son, "I'm so glad I was caught because your child was going to be next."
Yes.
And it just makes me think, like, how can a man thank his son for putting him behind bars and say, "That's because I was going to target your child next"? Whatever drove him to do the kind of behavior that he did was so all-consuming that he would thank his son for putting him.
Well, he said, well, he kind of did. He said, "Yeah, I'm glad, and you should be too." But as Jimmy explained it, and again, the footage is in my film Mothers and Molestation, which is on my YouTube channel, and available to watch free. But he said his dad wasn't saying, "Oh my God, what have I done?" His dad wasn't crying. He wasn't showing remorse. He was just talking to him like you and I are talking right now. And he's had extensive correspondence with his father to try to understand why his father did what he did, but he really hasn't he really hasn't learned that much. His father doesn't seem to show true remorse. I mean, he's in prison, but his father has done things like ask for pictures of children, and Jimmy's like, "There's no way you're going to get a photograph of my children."
And I think that is one of the things that I see continuously in these situations. There's this lack of awareness or remorse, or, I know in my own father's situation, when I confronted him about the abuse and renting us out, his response was just so matter of fact. Like, he denied it, but it was very kind of, "Oh no, didn't do that," and there's just there's something missing. There's some kind of emotional response missing. And I think that makes it so much harder in so many ways, because I think a lot of victims of sexual abuse do try to understand why their perpetrator did what they did. The worst part about it is that, you kind of have to give up on that. You have to just, because the reality is that from what I see, for the majority of people who have perpetrated these abuses against children, there seems to be a lack of remorse or a lack of understanding of the significance of what they have done.
Yeah, it's almost like they've lost some of their humanity, and it's not there. I mean,
yes. In terms of when people have memories come up, I know in the documentary you mentioned how you put off going on antidepressants because you thought, well, maybe my parents will be less likely to believe me if I'm on antidepressants. And there are so many situations where these memories come up, whether it's because someone's on a drug, whether it's because they've got alcohol in their system, whether it's just because the memories have come up, but for whatever reason, the people are unable to fully accept that they're real or true. Are there still things that someone can do? Because I feel like there's very all or nothing thinking when it comes to situations where someone's repressed memories come up. and there's this feeling like I have to do this and this and this and this. But I was wondering if you have any take on, if someone isn't feeling like their memories are, they can trust them 100%, are there still things that that person can do?
Oh, it's so hard when you just trust your own memories. And the thing about going on antidepressants, I was always like this good kid, trying to do everything right. And I think I took that into my recovery. And I have had to teach myself that it's okay to make mistakes in order to recover, in order to get well. And the thing that I think is important to remember is the people who aren't going to believe you aren't going to believe you no matter what. I mean, former Miss America, Marilyn Derbur, she had no reason. She was already famous. She was the daughter of a billionaire, so disclosing her abuse wasn't going to help her financially. And she's like above reproach, and yet there's people who don't believe her. Her family didn't believe her, but there's people who don't believe her still. And there's no way you can be perfect enough that people will believe you. You need to just go ahead and do what you need to do to recover, and just disregard the people who aren't going to believe you. And one thing I did was, early on, I would have times when I just didn't believe myself, and those were such horrible days. And at one point, well, really early on, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let myself doubt my memories only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and every other day I'm just gonna go with it, because I've got to get through this. And that really helped. And then later it'd be one day, and one day a week. And any of the doubts, I'd like reevaluated them on that one day, because it was just too hard to have the memories and doubt them. It's kind of like, it's just hurting yourself. So I think it's good to evaluate memories and get to a point where you're sure within yourself. And I did that on camera, and I'm glad I did that on camera, but I'm also glad it's done, because it's so much easier now that I'm just 100% sure my memories are true. I just know they are. And so advice to other people would be, limit the time you spend questioning yourself.
That's really good.
And just, there's so much of recovery that is fun and good. I mean, doing creative art, doing yoga, doing things that help your body feel good, just like closing the curtains and dancing to some music all by yourself. Just do some fun things to recover that don't get you in your mind about, is this true? Because regardless, you still need to heal those parts of yourself that are hurting. So just be really kind to yourself in your recovery. And it's normal not to always believe yourself. It's really normal to be hurt by people who don't believe you. But one thing I found in going public, and I'm not saying people should go public, one thing I found in going public is, I thought there'd be a large percentage of people that didn't believe me. As it turns out, almost everyone believes me. It's only the people who are in some way related or influenced by my perpetrators who don't believe me.
Yes.
I haven't had people go, I just don't believe that's true. I mean, rarely, because I have about 1 million views of my films now. And I get comments, I reply to comments, but almost all of them are positive. And so
I think going out and, sorry, go on.
I think as you start, you just tell the people, you just tell the people related to you, or the people who are, and once you get, your circle gets bigger, you find out that people tend to believe survivors.
Yes. And I think once you are open, Alwyn and I have been very open with people around us about our memories resurfacing, and it ends up leading to conversations where people have come to us and they've said, I have these memories, but I'm not sure if they're real, and I don't know what to do about it. And I don't want to go to a therapist because I don't know if I can prove that they're real. And I always say to them, when you're going to a therapist, you're not going to a courtroom. You're not going to be put on trial. When you go to a therapist because you have memories coming up, what they're looking for is, how is it affecting you? Like if you've got memories coming up and now you're having nightmares, or you're having severe anxiety, or you're feeling grief or depressed, that's what they're going to want to work with. It's not a courtroom,
Right.
So you can absolutely go to a therapist, even if you don't have proof. You can say, look, these are memories that have come up. I'm not convinced that they're accurate, but what I am convinced is they are affecting my life in these ways. This is what's been happening for me since these memories came up. This is what I've been feeling. I'd like to work on that. But when people ask me, you know, like, oh, these memories have come up, should I tell my family or whatever? And I'm always like, you have to decide for yourself if you're in an emotionally stable position with the right amount of support around you to be able to do that. You know, Alwyn had 2 kids who were very young, who ended up suffering a lot as a result of her decline in mental health, because we came out with this and it was a very traumatic time for us. And so now I always think, you know, I know that the world makes things out to be very black and white. You should do this, you shouldn't do this. But the reality is that, you know, sometimes we have to make sure that whether it's us telling our family, whether it's us going to the police, whether it's us reporting it to child services or anything else, we have to make sure that we can handle, you know, the situation emotionally, what our environment is like, that we have the right support network around us. And yeah, I think it's very easy from an outside perspective to say, you should do this, you should do that. But I always say to people, you have to think about what you can do right now and make the decision based on that.
It's good advice. Yes.
The other question I had for you was, you know, would you want to get all of your memories back? Is that something that you strive for, to have all
No.
of the memories of your childhood?
No, because it was fairly early in my recovery. You know, I think it was a year or 2 years after I first remembered my abuse. So I was 37 when I first remembered. I may have been 39 at the time, but I just kept having these. No, I think it was just a year after. I think I was maybe 38 at the time. And I just kept having this horrible memory, these horrible, and then another horrible memory. And I had come to know that it seemed like God gave me the memories for a reason. So I asked God, I'm like, why do I need that memory? And finally, I kept not understanding these just bizarre memories. Why did I need to know that? And finally I said, God, is it just so I will know that it couldn't have been any worse than it was? That it couldn't possibly have been any worse or I would be dead? And that was the answer. And so I'm like, okay, God, I got that now. I understand that I will no longer say to myself or to anyone else, it could have been worse. I will no longer say that. And then I haven't gotten the memories I get for a reason. I don't always know the reason, but often I do. And I still get some memories, but not that much now. And no, I don't ever want to know all the abuse. I don't think I ever will. Now, I do have my good memories from my childhood that I've always remembered my childhood quite well. And so I do have good memories, but some of those I don't even know. Like I remember my father giving me a dress and feeling so special when he did, but now I really think it may have been a payoff. So I have to take the good memories with a grain of salt too.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want all the memories. I don't have a need to like catalog every memory or I want the memories that will help me be safer and will help me help other people be safer. Those are what I want.
That's interesting. So you do have memories from when you were a child. You just had suppressed the memories of abuse.
I had no memories of abuse. I didn't remember abuse except for when it was happening. Even as a child, I didn't know I was being abused except for when I was being abused.
Yes,
I had
that is
some odd
interesting.
fears and stuff, but I didn't know it except for while it was happening. And I know different people, it works differently, but yeah, so I have the other memories. I really thought I had a good childhood. And I was questioning some things about my childhood, but if someone had said, were you ever abused? And were you ever raped? Before I was 37, I would have said no. But yeah, I have actually a good memory for kind of detailed things about, interpersonal. I remember school. I remember many things about my childhood.
Yeah, it just shows, it's interesting how it shows up for different people, because I don't have any memories from when I'm 5 until I'm 10. So I don't remember any birthdays. I don't remember what school teachers I had. I don't remember what even part of the school my class was in. It's just blank. There's nothing there. And it's interesting how for some people, they're like yourself, you're able to just block out the specific memories that you're able to, that you need to block out, and then you can leave the rest. And then for other people, it just needs to be a complete wiping clean of the slate of memory. And even to this day, it's gotten a lot better, but I still don't have a very good memory. You know, like I have to keep a detailed calendar to know what I did last week. But it just shows, you know, it can show up so differently for different people. This, you know, this regardless of what type of abuse that it was, or how the trauma showed up for that person. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about, because in our situation, I was made to engage in sexual acts with other children as a child, and that was filmed or photographed. And one of the things that has come out of that for me is this feeling like, what if I, as a child, did something that hurt another child? You know, like I've heard a number of people speak on podcasts, people I really admire come out with stories of how they were sexually abused by an older child, and how that has so gravely and significantly affected their adult life. And it's something that, because there's so much memory that I just don't have, it crosses my mind, what if I had hurt a child and they are now an adult who struggles with PTSD as severely as I do? Is that something that ever crosses your mind?
You're such a kind person. And well, I think earlier on it did, but to me that's related to the shame, because I mean, you would never say, if there was a 10-year-old with a gun pointed at her head and she hurt another child, and she was told to hurt another child and she did, you would never say to that 10-year-old, you did something wrong. And that's the position you were in, and that's the position I was in. My sister was 2 years older than me, and she would be told to hit me and to hurt me in different ways, and she was just doing what she was told to do. I mean, you know, and I don't see it as her abusing me. I see it as my parents using my love for her to abuse me. I mean, I don't interpret it that way. But if you see the bigger picture and you know someone else is controlling that person, the person who's controlling them is the abuser, not the other child. And I mean, not that, older children can abuse younger children, but this is something that's just not talked about much, is the in child pornography. In child pornography, often there is child sex acts, and you know, just really sick people want to see that kind of child pornography, and so this is done. And sure, one child's older than the other child, and that would just stand to reason. You wouldn't have always two children exactly the same age. And but it's hard to get away from all the shame of it, because it's just not that, if it's not the child's fault, it's not the adult's fault if adult is made to do something. I mean, we have compassion even for adults in certain situations, and who just have no choice, truly have no choice. And
I think the other part of that for me, though, with the children, is the normalization of that behavior. You know, I know as a child, because, you know, I was exposed to that from pre-verbal, you know, the earliest memory I have of being sexually abused was 2 or 3, like, but I don't doubt that it probably happened before that.
Same here.
But it was normalized from before I could even speak that kind of behavior. And so then you know, and again, I don't have memories. I don't know if I found that behavior normal as a child and therefore engaged with sexual acts outside of the behavior, outside of the situation.
Acting out outside of when you weren't being forced, you did it did it other places.
That's also where it comes up in my mind. If it was normalized, if that was what I felt to be normal behavior, could I have then behaved in a way towards another child outside of that abuse situation? And it just brings up this question in my mind of, you know, if a child is sexually abusing another child, right, and as they grow up they continue that sexual abuse, you know, at what age does it cross over from victim behavior to perpetrator behavior? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's not an age, it's an attitude. I mean, you're saying maybe I did these things as a child or, as a teenager or whatever. It's not an age, because if you're like, one thing that helps me is no matter what I've done wrong, I'm willing to apologize. If I find
Yes.
I've done something wrong, I apologize. And I mean it. And that's all you can do. That's all you can do, is when it's been brought to your attention, you apologize.
If someone brought it to my attention, I would, I can't tell you, I would move mountains for that person to apologize and to
Yes.
make right. And I would do everything. If they wanted me to turn myself into the police, I would absolutely do that. Like, and I guess that's what you mean by attitude. There, if someone is completely unwilling to take responsibility for what they did, completely unwilling to apologize, completely unwilling to do what they need to do for that person, I guess that's the point that you're making about attitude.
Yes, yes, because we can't control the past. We can only control what we can do now. And your attitude is one of kindness, total kindness and total giving. And I would say that for someone like you, the more you can do that for yourself. You see what I mean? Anytime you're hard on yourself, you're hurting yourself. And the more you can have that kind of attitude toward you, that's the attitude you need to have in case something like this did happen, in case there was some sexual acting out or something. You need to have that kind of attitude toward yourself, that you will move mountains to heal and to help and to embrace that part of you. And
I think that's, sorry, go on.
And then maybe, if you need to remember something, you will, but you need to know that that hurt part of you needs to know that this, I think of myself as my own mother, that the mother, that the mother in me will mother no matter what I have done wrong. The mother in me will mother that. And, if my sons come to me with, like, I divorced their father, if they come to me with some specific things I did wrong in that, in the adjustment to the divorce and not helping them adjust or whatever, I just already know I will apologize. I mean, I know my attitude. I already know my attitude. And that helps me not to worry about what they may bring up or how it may have hurt them or whatever, because I already know what I'll do, which is apologize, completely, and do anything I can to make it right. But I think that hurt child in you, if you did act out as a child and were sexually aggressive toward another child, you need to have that same empathy toward yourself, because look at what you went through. I mean, you went through just horrible, horrible things, and that's the empathy you need to have toward yourself.
And I think that this is, again, part of the whole, part of me wants to have my memories, because I don't know, like, I don't know if I hurt another child. I don't know if I'm lining up in the post office in my town, if the man on front of me recognizes me as a child that he either sexually abused or has photographs or video of. I don't know if there are certain people who I should be wary or, afraid of, that I'm currently not, wary or, concerned about. All of this I don't know, because I don't have the memories, and that makes me want to have them. But at the same time, I don't want to know all of that. Like, I have enough to know how to heal. I have enough that I can heal what I need to heal. And if there are more memories that need to come so that I can heal all parts of myself, I welcome them. But I am so grateful that my mind suppressed my memories. And one of the essays in your book is this subject of the things that are really good about suppressing your memories. And I wholeheartedly agree. I could not have lived the life that I've lived and now live the life that I live now with all of those memories playing over and over and over and over in my head. Yeah, for sure. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was, the types of therapy or support systems out there that are available for people who are sexually attracted to children. I know in your book, part of How I Healed, you have a section on support groups, which I found was absolutely amazing. And I got some really good ideas for possible support groups that I had never even thought of to join. And when when everything came out, I wanted to give my father a letter, but I wanted to give him a letter through my therapist, through a therapist. I didn't want to communicate directly with him. And so I tried to find him a therapist. And I couldn't actually find anyone who would work with him. Now, he wasn't, I think even a lot of those therapists thought that he was taking responsibility for what he did. He wasn't. But it made me think, are there services out there for people who are sexually attracted to children? Like, the amount of people who would now not struggle if someone had helped my father heal whatever demons he had inside him prior to his behavior with us and his behavior with other children. It's in the thousands, the amount of people who would not suffer as a result of one man, one adult being helped at a time. Now, obviously, the person has to be willing and wanting to heal, but I do believe that there are people out there who are sexually attracted to children who do not want to act on that and who do need help to deal with that. Do you know of any services that are
there's sex
available?
addiction. Yeah, there are sex addiction therapists. I mean, I know someone in Seattle who's a sex addiction therapist. And she she does work in that area. And then there's in the sex for the people who have been apprehended in prisons, there's programs. I mean,
I'm more so speaking to people who have not hurt a child, who have a desire, like maybe they themselves have experienced sexual abuse in their childhood, and they have these feelings and sexual desire towards a child. They do not want to hurt a child. They want help with that.
If they never hurt a child, they could go to many therapists who would work with them. If they never hurt a child, there's nothing to report. They don't need to report. And I think someone like that who is willing to work on it, might find that something happened in their own childhood. But you could tell. I mean, I don't think it's that unusual for a therapist to be able to work with someone who has never hurt a child. I've known a couple of people who, like someone who was sexually abused by her brother. Her brother, when she talked about her own abuse, he said he couldn't remember, but he was completely respectful of her, and he let her talk, and he encouraged her in her recovery.
Yeah. I think one of the things that Alwyn and I really wanted to do with this podcast was try to reduce the shame that people feel so that they can access help and services that they need. And it started because Alwyn was getting so violent and angry with her kids, and she felt so much shame around getting help because she didn't feel like society would, she didn't feel like she would be helped because she was doing something wrong. And I think there's so many situations where shame prevents people from getting the help they need. And I see this situation as a very similar situation. Like there are adults, I believe, out there who don't want to hurt a child, and the shame stops them from getting the help that they need. But the reality is that you can go and see a therapist. Like you said, you can go and say you have, potentially a sex addiction. If you don't want to mention, that it's a child that you have, feelings towards, there's a lot of ways that you can get the help you need. And if there's any way that reducing shame will help a person get the help they need so that they then don't go on and hurt a child, I just
there's Sex Addicts Anonymous. It's a part of the 12-step group, Sex Addicts Anonymous, and she does talk about that in her book. But there are groups for female sex addicts. There are male, female. But Sex Addicts Anonymous would be a group where they that is a support group for sex addicts.
Well, it's about time anyways to finish up.
It is.
I just wanted to ask you what you're working on. What are you working on now that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I hope you'll put my link to my YouTube channel, and Mothers and Molestation, a film about child abuse, is on it. And then also a link to my memoir, which can be free.
I did want to mention about the memoir. So I went to get it. I went to my Kindle app to get it. It didn't allow me to purchase it on my Kindle app. It said I needed to go to Amazon. So I went to Amazon.com.au, which is the Australian version.
Yes.
And it said I couldn't buy it on the Australian site. I needed to go to the US site. So it gave the button. I clicked on the button. It brought me to the US site. Exactly the same situation, except the price was in US dollars. I clicked on the buy button and my normal Australian credit card came up. I purchased it and then it was on my app. So I just wanted to mention that for the listeners so that they understand that if they get a little thing that says, oh, you have to buy this from the US site, that's no problem. You just click the link, it brings you to the site. You'll be able to use your credit card from wherever it is in the world you are. It's just a little extra step that you have to do when you're not in the US.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes. And if you have problems with that, you also can email me, maryknighthappy@yahoo.com, and you can put my email so people can connect with me that way as well.
Perfect. Mary, thank you so much for all the time that you've given today, plus the time that you took to respond to emails. And I just really appreciate the work that you're doing and how generous you are with your time and your energy.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
You too.
Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. All the links to the information we discussed in this episode will be in the show notes, including timestamps where we change topics, so if you want to come back later and just listen to one section, you can. If you haven't done so already, please join our Facebook group, Let Me Be Free, The Wounded Inner Child, and post either anonymously or not what's going on for you in your world. We'd also be delighted if you would share this podcast or the Facebook group with one person who you think would benefit from the information. Be along, Mahaguf. Have a beautiful day.